we are trending toward a better news. And right now, patients currently hospitalized with COVID are 66, and that's a decline of a -1. The positive part we talked about is the testing. We have a total of over 613,000 tests, and that's an increase of 11,450. It really is important to thank and compliment the governor, our Fairfield town leadership, our businesses, and generally the Connecticut public for understanding the danger and the seriousness of the COVID pandemic. You know, we still have a long way to go in this, but people need to understand, just look at the surge in infections and tragedies that are occurring in California, Texas, and Florida, just to name a few states that is experiencing initially this first wave of this pandemic. So I would encourage us to stay vigilant and stay safe. And in regards back to school, I have some very serious concerns on the logistics, financing, and most importantly, ensuring that our students, teachers, and staff are safe and healthy. I truly have advocated that our State Department of Education needs to provide much more clarification on a number of key questions and really quell the anxiety that's due to some of the vagueness on this full return to this fall. You know, the importance is really having information and having the local input to have a concrete plan. I know Fran is an absolute essential part of that solution. You know, our back to school is not only about school and education, but it's about the social emotional learning. It's about the routine that we need to reestablish, but it's also an economic impact because parents will actually have to dramatically change their work schedule and manage expectations if school plans change quickly. So again, I'm going to repeat again, it's something that's absolutely critical to me. And I'm thrilled that Fran accepted my invitation to join the Fairfield delegation today, because for me, the safety of students and teachers and staff and the peace of mind of parents are absolutely not negotiable. And we need to have a plan in place. And we all need everybody and all the shareholders to be engaged in this. So I'm thrilled to hear Fran, but more importantly, I think it's important for all of us as a delegation to demand clear and concise answers and directions from the administration to move forward on going back to school.
Thanks, Tony. And I'm going to jump into the federal response. And there actually has been a lot of movement in that in the last couple of weeks. And there is actually a good chance that some more relief will be on the way for those hurting from the economic impact of COVID. A new stimulus package may be introduced as early as next week when Congress returns from recess. Senate Republicans are expecting to present lawmakers with a draft of stimulus legislation, which has input from the White House. While it's unclear which provisions will make the final cut and reach the president's desk, a second round of stimulus checks also has the support of Democrats, many Republicans, and the president. So the real question is what the amount is going to be and what the eligibility criteria are going to be. The proposals range from a repeat of the original $1,200 one-time stimulus check to as much as $2,000 a month, which I do think is unlikely. But if there is a second stimulus check, it's most likely not to be a recurring payment, and it will also probably be limited to those that earn only below $40,000 a year. Under the previous measure, taxpayers' adjusted gross income could not exceed $75,000, if you recall. The other question is how much money will go to states and local governments. Without federal support, some of these cities and states are likely to face severe budget cuts and bankruptcy. There's actually an article in the Connecticut Post just this morning on this topic on how Connecticut is handling it and how this is very important for our state and for many municipalities. Congress is expected to approve state and local aid, but again, the issue is going to be, you know, what the amount is going to be, and that differs between the parties. Republicans down in D.C. are looking to spend about $30 billion, while Democrats have said that about $430 billion is the right number. So there's a lot of in between both of them. And on the $600 federal, I'm just going to let people in. On the $600 federal weekly unemployment benefits, those are expiring on July 31st. Most Democrats want to extend that due to double-digit unemployment. I believe the unemployment number in Connecticut is about 17%. A lot of Republicans in D.C. Are concerned that amount is too high and potentially discouraging workers to go back to work. Instead, I think Senate Republicans in the White House are talking about a $450 a week cash return to work bonus. And then the other issue that's being discussed is liability protections for businesses, hospitals, and schools. Lawyers get involved in these things. You can see with COVID the potential for litigation down the road, but hopefully we can get a solution to that. Things that likely will not get approved are, I think President Trump is looking to have a payroll tax cut to jumpstart the economy. I don't think that's going to make it from everything I've seen and read and heard. Student loan forgiveness plan, large-scale comprehensive infrastructure plan, something we talked about in previous webinars, likely not going to happen. And also a 4,000 tax credit travel bonus for anyone who takes a vacation at least 50 miles from home. All those things are kind of, I think, off the table for now. But that's the federal stimulus update. Hopefully we'll know more in the near future. And with that, I'll pass it on to Laura.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So just for a quick update in terms of what's happening with the Department of Labor, that has been one of the biggest issues that we've been dealing with, along with, certainly how businesses are reopening, and our focus totally will be on supporting how our schools are going to be reopening. But from a DOL perspective, there have been some recent developments. And if you haven't recently been, if you are currently collecting, I'm sure you have, but the DOL has implemented a new website, and along with that is their Consumer Customer Center. So this is something that they were talking about for quite a while. It is in a phased launch, but it is beginning. They have put in about 120 new staff funded by the Federal CARES Act at a cost of about $4 million. And it has enabled them to have some more contemporary ways of dealing with constituents through phone, through text, through chat. So if you haven't been at the DOL website, I'd encourage that you do check that out. It is way more user-friendly. And they do have the chat and text features that you can take advantage of. Unemployment claims for our state since March, we've had 5 years of applications. And as Brian said, the state is estimating our unemployment rate between 16 and 17%, which is certainly higher than the national average that had been 14.7 and now seems to have dropped to about 11. We gained about 5% of jobs from May to June, about 75,000 new jobs, so that was really positive. And for the DOL as well, they're with some of this new technology and the new people that have been hired, the backlog now, instead of 6 weeks for claims, is really closer to 2 to 3. So some headway. If any of you, your friends, your family are having issues with unemployment claims, please contact your representative. If it is me, great. If it is Representative Farnen, Representative Cristin McCarthy Vahey, and certainly Senator Hwang, we do coordinate. It doesn't help to have multiple inquiries on a claim. Believe it, it is faster to have one single claim for a person that then is followed up on. So we are here for you. Hopefully it's smooth sailing. And that's the latest for now.
Thanks, Laura. And with that, we'll pass over to Cristin McCarthy Vahey, who's going to give an update on the state response and the state reopening. So I'll turn it to you, Cristin.
Thank you so much, Brian, and it's great to be here. Fran, thank you for being with us. Laura, I loved hearing that update today. Boy, is it good news and a relief to know that there are more people available to help so many residents. So thank you for that. I'm just going to talk about a couple things about reopening, and I'm going to show you my new mask. Masks are really key to our ability to continue to be out and about in the community. And though there might have been some mixed reviews and mixed messaging, as well as maybe not as definitive research in the beginning, we're hearing more. There was a recent Journal of the American Medical Association published with Dr. Redfield, the head of the CDC, and 2 other doctors talking about the significance and importance. And why I say that is because Connecticut has continued to prioritize health and safety, and it's been great on our Zooms all across the board. We have all been consistent in messaging about public health and how important that is for our residents. And certainly we're going to talk a minute more about our students. So keep wearing your masks, be fastidious, be diligent, be disciplined about that. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, and stay 6 feet apart and stay outside. whenever possible with groups. I can't help myself with the public health messages. Can't say it enough. The governor has put phase 3 on hold. So in terms of doing more of the larger groups or indoor dining in bars, we're waiting. And we're waiting not because Connecticut isn't doing well, but because we know that we're not an island. And so many of the states around the country are seeing surges. There's only so much we can do on our own. So we have that, as well as travel quarantines, self-quarantines. And again, that will rely on how we as residents work together and abide by that self-quarantining. I've talked before too about contact tracing. It's really important if you do test positive, or if you're contacted by someone you know having tested positive, that you work together with the health department. There are no apps that track people, and nobody from any public health department will be asking you for money. There are some people who are trying to do some scams. Finally, we're here today to talk about our students and schools. I've tried to stay in touch periodically with our superintendent and members of our Board of Ed, our chair, Cristin McCarthy Vahey, my most recent conversation with Board of Ed member Leeper, and Tuesday they had a meeting, and also have talked with Jen Kennelly as well. The big question that everyone has is, will we be able to go back to school? And we've heard a lot of different things, and there are so many questions, and as Senator Hwang said, there's so much anxiety about that, and I'm sure we're all hearing from parents. So I would say this: Mr. Cummings, along with the Board of Ed, the other members, Jeff Peterson, Trish Pitko, we have a tremendous Board of Ed working together, again, across the aisle to assure that our kids are going to be safe at school. And really, the conversations are being guided by science and by what is in the best interest, and that thoughtful planning. I will say the last thing in terms of reopening and thinking about school, and I've been very privileged to work alongside Fran Rabinowitz on the Social Emotional Learning Collaborative, and I just this morning participated in part 1 of a suicide postvention training, thinking about the mental health needs of our young students and teachers as we head back to school, given what we've been through. And we know that's going to be a big consideration, and Fran has a lot of amazing experience with that. And I'm grateful that we're considering that, as is our commissioners, as we go back. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Brian, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you.
Thanks, Cristin. And yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Things like masks should not be controversial or political. People should wear their masks. With that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Fran. We are super excited to have you here, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions from people.
I am so honored to be here. When Tony contacted me, I was thrilled. I'm always happy to receive input from all of the stakeholders in our educational program. And I will tell you, I've had a long career in education. I've been a superintendent, and I've been at the State Department of Education as Associate Commissioner. I would say that hands down, this is the most challenging time that I have ever been through. And I stepped back and was reflective on why that was. And frankly, it is because it's ambiguous. There's ambiguity, there's fluidity. We make plans and we change plans. And it's because we're looking at the science, we're looking at the data, and we're trying our best to do what is the very best for children, given what we know about the present environment. So you are going to see changes. I just got off the phone with superintendents in your area, actually. And, you know, there's a lot of frustration because things change, and they change based upon the data that we're seeing. So let me take you through where we are right now. As of today, the superintendents are sending in a rough estimate of their expected costs due to COVID-19 in order to open schools. So that's PPE equipment, that's substitutes, that's transportation, that's sanitization, that's PPE equipment, etc. My understanding is, and I have a meeting this afternoon with the Office of Policy and Management, the CARES Act funding will be coming forward. And I have been very strong with saying, while I know that we have alliance districts and alliance districts certainly need our help, the Bridgeports, Norwalks, and Stanfords of the world, we also have other districts that may in fact not be alliance districts, but have had budget cuts, et cetera, and they also need our help. So those resources will be forthcoming. You can be sure that we'll be advocating for the greatest amount we can possibly get. So with that said, let me also tell you that the guidelines call for 3 plans to be submitted on a district-wide basis. Those 3 plans are to bring all children back. If the data suggests that we can bring all children back, which right now it seems to suggest that in Connecticut we are, I believe, still less than 1%, and that also calls for a hybrid model to bring children back partially, a couple of days a week, or 2 weeks a month, and two weeks off for distance learning. And then it calls for a fully online model. It is incredibly difficult to predict, as you have just said, where we will be in August. I mean, right now we're planning to bring all children back. I'm going to be very transparent with you and tell you that we're looking at 5 factors in that to keep our kids healthy and safe. We're looking at hand washing, sanitizing, face coverings, cohorting. Wait a minute, there's one more. Cohorting, face coverings, sanitizing, hand washing. I'll think of the other one, but those, not one of those, did I say cohorting? Yes. Not one of those alone is a magic bullet. They have to work together in order for them to be successful, to keep our kids safe. So all of us are planning as we move forward for those pieces to be in place. When I talk about transparency, I'm going to tell you that most districts have been able to do this at the elementary and middle school level. They're having great difficulty at the high school level. And I'm honestly not sure that we're going to be able to bring all kids back every day at the high school level. Just saying that right now, there's no decision being made, but I am certainly providing the feedback that the social distancing and the cohorting is almost impossible at the high school level. So the superintendents are very, very busy doing plans. We're following as much of the data and the science as we possibly can. The American Academy of Pediatricians has said that it's good with bringing all kids back, and so we're trying our best to do that. I happen to believe that this mode of learning, the online learning, was most difficult on our youngest children and our students with disabilities. And we've got to get them in as much as we possibly can. With that said, health and safety is the top priority. I would also add to that, just so I can tell you very straightforwardly, this is not an education problem, it's a health problem. And we are listening to the health officials on when we're making these decisions, local health officials, as well as the state and national health. We're trying to make the best decisions possible at the school level to accommodate that. Right now, generally speaking, about 20% of parents are saying they will not send their children back. That follows much of what we've seen in Europe. However, that trend doesn't usually hold. If they find out that it's safe, they will, within 2 or 3 weeks, begin to send the children. We totally understand it. We are going to provide a remote learning model for those families, and that remote learning model in most cases will probably be streaming synchronous learning. So first grade, if they're learning about literacy in the classroom, there'll be webcams set up and iPads, and they will be streaming the lesson to the kids at home. Is it ideal? Absolutely not, but it's probably the best we can do at this point. I would also say to you that Cristin brought up the whole social emotional learning piece. I can't tell you how important that is and how important it is for us to have training for teachers on that. I'm working very closely right now with Mark Brackett from Yale and the Dalio philanthropy, and we're hoping to have that training statewide beginning this summer with some help from Dalio. Educators that participate will receive a certificate from Yale in social emotional learning. So that's where we are on that piece. I would also say to you, we will not be where we were in the spring on distance learning. We've been doing incredible amounts of work, both at the State Department, and a group of us have been working with Columbia University. We are going to release a framework for distance learning this afternoon, hopefully, from Columbia, free of charge. It's a framework that allows school districts to move their resources into this framework. And we're hopeful moving forward that will be in much better shape. I hope that we don't have to go to a full online learning platform, but I'm not convinced that we won't. And so we're prepared for that, or at least better prepared. I still worry about the availability of devices and connectivity for some of our school districts, but that is also being worked on. So I've given you some of the highlights. I always find it better to talk less and listen more and get the questions so that I can ensure that I'm zeroing in on what your concerns are.
Sounds good, Fran. We had a bunch of questions come in, but I know, Tony, you've had a few too that come to your office.
Yes, absolutely, respecting the time. So Fran, there is a conversation about 3 different plans that are in place, yes, depending on medical data and circumstances. Could you just share with the audience what the 3 different kind of plans are from a standpoint of full in school to a hybrid system to online learning?
Yes.
Is that in existence where there's a 3 the ABC plan, so to speak?
Yes, that is, every district must submit that plan by July 24th to the State Department of Education. And every district has a plan for full-in hybrid. Now, the hybrid can be very different depending upon which district you're in. And I've been encouraging districts to go regional on that. Just because I think it would make it easier on teachers, et cetera. If, you know, a teacher lives in Fairfield but teaches in Darien, you want to ensure that their children at home are in school on the same days, but we'll see where that goes. The hybrid models are, for the most part, 2 days in. Monday, Tuesday is cohort A. Wednesday, everybody's on distance learning, and it allows the schools to be emptied and sanitized, cleaned deeply. And Thursday, Friday is cohort B. So kids are in school 2 days a week. It is not, it's not ideal, guys. Trust me. None of these are wonderful, wonderful plans. They're the best we can do. I know for families, I was a working mom my whole life, and the economy, would certainly recover a whole lot more with full in, and that's what we're hoping for. And so it's full in, it's hybrid. Most are 2 days in, 2 days out, with a cleaning day in the middle. And it's, but some districts are going 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out, depending on the district and, the context of the district. And then we're looking at a full distance learning model if need be, and there are guideposts. That data hasn't come out yet, but I'm sorry, those guardrails haven't come out yet. And we've asked them for the State Department, to Tony's point, to be incredibly specific in those guardrails. How do we know when to close down? If there is a case of COVID, how do we close down, and when do we reopen? And so that data and those guidelines are not out yet.
And we can request that from a specific district. The second quick question I have is, you did talk about some CARES money for the cost burden that would be borne by the various schools, but has the superintendent group talked about requesting a formula, a defined formula, so that that we can predict and allocate our budgeting? Because the idea right now, when the governor says we will take care of you, but we don't have a defined formula, it's got to be troubling for Board of Eds and superintendents. I was hoping that there were discussions among the superintendents to ask from the Office of Public Policy and Management a formula to define various aspects of testing, PPE, masks, and if not, I would encourage that. The third quick question, and I appreciate the time, is what's going to happen to chorus, theater, sports teams that when school gets back and going? Because that is an issue that is important from a social emotional dynamic. Yep. But we've not talked about it. And has the superintendent's given some consideration of what's going to happen to those extracurricular activities that are really a kind of a fulcrum for potential interactions that we were trying to avoid?
Yeah, great questions. First of all, there is a formula for the CARES Act money. There is $111 million for Connecticut. We're dealing with some issues because the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, put some guidance in there that made it very difficult for us. It was based originally on Title I funding. And so every district got a sum of money based upon the students in need in their district. But they were told that that money could be used for all schools. And so we were pretty well settled. We were okay on that. And then there was guidance that was published from the secretary that said, well, yes, but if you allocate it that way and you use it across all schools, then you must give the money to private schools, not just for Title I, but for all of the students enrolled in private schools, which was a great deal of money that was taken from the public schools to be put into private schools. So there are some states that are suing on that. And it has not been settled in Connecticut as yet as to how we will do it, because we want to, it's with the Attorney General. We want to be ensured that individual districts will not be sued. So that's a little bit of an issue right now. I believe that that's why the CARES Act money isn't out there. There's also COVID recovery funding, and that has not been allocated as yet. And so that is why I can't give you an exact allocation. I also know that the HEROES Act money, supposedly there's $58 billion that is in the HEROES Act, but that's tied up in the Senate. So I'm not sure how quickly that will come. In terms of sports, right now, the intention is to move ahead with fall sports, to cohort the students. And that comes right from CIAC, because we feel like you do that, you know, sports are important to kids. And if CIAC, we believe, will do it very safely. Right now, there are a lot of private places doing sports, and they're not necessarily doing it as safely. So right now, the intention is to move it forward. I mean, honestly, guys, that could change depending upon where our numbers are in Connecticut.
Well, thank you, Fran. And thank you, Brian, for allowing me to ask these questions. But it's not just sports, right, Fran? It's also
Of course,
all the other activities that
yes.
form the school. But thank you, Brian. And I appreciate, Fran, your time on these questions. And thank you for indulging me. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And with what your first question you had about the 3 different models, there was one question that came in from the audience. I believe the answer is no, but I'll have Fran answer. It says, has the state declared the levels of COVID-19 that would trigger moving from one plan to another? And if they haven't declared what caseloads would trigger the move from, say, full to hybrid distance, when will they?
I believe that the governor in the press conference last week said that he would make a decision on the model early August with how schools would open. You know, I've heard 5% and below is the full model going forward, but don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But we have told the governor that we need that decision early August. Families have to make plans, as well as our teachers and all of our educators. So that's what I'm hearing. And, you know, the guideposts for opening and closing, by the way, schools and districts is incredibly important as well. As you know, everybody angst about closing down in the spring. And I think that we need to be very clear on when we do close and for how long.
Sure. Now, these next round of questions, I believe they come from the state teachers union. I've seen them online, but they're great questions.
Yep.
And it is, you know, if a teacher tests positive, are they to quarantine for 2 to 3 weeks? And then, like, I'll just give you, like, they're all kind of like related. And then it's like, and if they're, you know, during that period, how do you obtain a substitute teacher? And then the follow-on question is, will all the students then also need to get tested? So you can take them in any order.
Well, I don't know all of those answers. I do know that if a teacher does test positive, absolutely would need to quarantine. You know, there is something in the executive order that of the governor that says if they can't quarantine, they could be retested and come back. But the fact of the matter is they can quarantine. So we have some right now that are quarantined because they've been in contact with someone who has had COVID. So yes, they would quarantine. And I'll tell you, I'm just being upfront and honest. We're very concerned about the ability to secure substitutes. We're looking for flexibility right now. I sent a letter to the chairs of the Education Committee for the legislature in the special session to please look at some flexibility and certification so that we could use teachers differently. If there's a 7th grade social studies teacher, but I have a 5th grade class, I'd like to be able to use that teacher there. Also, I'd like to be able to use some of the teachers that are in our teacher prep programs and are toward the end of the program with student teaching. So, you know, that could be considered for teaching, because we do know we're going to have a sizable number of our teachers not returning as well because of immune deficiencies or age. So we're anticipating that and looking for that flexibility.
Another question that came in, this kind of relates to, I think, one of your topics you were talking about earlier in regards to when students come in today. One thing that wasn't raised was, would they be doing temperature checks also, or is that by school, town by town?
Well, you know, temperature checks, when we wrote the summer school guidance, we had temperature checks in there for everyone. It appears that the Department of Health is changing their guidance on that and saying that temperature checks are no longer necessary or viable because there are so many false positives or false negatives. So as of right now, temperature checks are not big.
Another question that came in, will the standards that apply to public schools be applied to private schools?
You know, that's a great question. And I sat on the Reopen Connecticut committee with independent schools as well. And I believe they have adopted very similar standards to ours. I don't believe they're mandated for the private schools, but I would assure you that their plans were very tight and very similar.
Gotcha. Another question we have here is, could masks, which are being mandated through the schools, could those potentially be exceptions to that mandate if the students and the teacher are 6 feet apart inside? And I think the answer is no, but just wondering your take on that.
Actually, yes, there are times when they will be allowed. For example, the teacher may take that mask off if they're 6 feet apart and instructing, which makes sense because they have to speak, and it can be muffled for some children. We're also looking at mask breaks during the day, you know, bringing the children outside and letting them have breaks. It is, let me also be honest here. It's just not, it's not feasible for a 5-year-old to have a mask on for 6 hours a day. It just isn't. We've got to provide breaks for them. I don't know about you, but I need a break from my mask when I come out of the grocery store. So I think we have to be realistic on that.
Yeah, no, this came up at our Board of Education meeting this week, and that was a topic of discussion and a good one. and about how, like, from a social and emotional perspective,
Yeah.
we need to ensure that kids are, we have to remember that kids are kids.
Yep.
Next question I have here is, to address systematic racial issues in Connecticut, should we be considering, as part of educational reform, changes like combining school districts like Bridgeport and Fairfield, or other things like that?
I think that equity has never been more important, and or the lack of equity has never been more apparent than it has been during the COVID-19. I mean, I worked in Bridgeport for many years. I was superintendent in Bridgeport, and I know the inequity that exists, and it continues to exist today. We have to ensure that our students have the very basics, like devices to access the learning and connectivity. Do I believe that we will continue to work on equity measures? Yes, absolutely. It's got to be every part of the consideration. As we even put these plans together, we have to look at equity. How that will be done, will it be combining districts? I mean, I don't see that tomorrow, but I certainly see an equity issue that we all have responsibility for. And I fought back today with some guidance that came out and said, well, the district is responsible for ensuring that every child has a device and internet connection. I said, I'm sure our districts would be happy to take responsibility if you can provide the resources to make that happen, because that's huge, and I don't think we can ignore it. So it's a great question, and yes, it needs to be front and center.
And this next question is mine. So one thing that I've noticed from a lot of my friends, parents who have kids in private school, there was a lot more video streaming of instruction. Do we think, and obviously, this emergency distance learning, and I was very proud of this job that the Fairfield Public School System did this past spring, but I think myself and many parents would like to see more video. If we do end up in an emergency distance learning situation again, that there would be a lot more kind of video streaming of live instructional. Do you think that's going to happen?
Ryan, what a great question. Yes, I do. I mean, I think that we've had, we did it in an emergency, and we did it the best way we can. But, I mentioned that framework from Columbia. It talks about teachers being present online, synchronous learning for every single subject area every day, not for 45 minutes, but for part of that lesson. And then students have independent time to get the work done, just as we do in class. But yes, we are pushing strongly for synchronous learning.
Brian, do you mind if I do a quick follow-up? I don't.
Sure.
Yep.
One of the things, having worked on the student data privacy law and knowing just now, my son just popped in, he just got home and he came in to say hi, which was lovely. But this is the struggle, right? Of the balance between who knows what's going on at home and the whole, what's being heard from home and those privacy boundaries. How has that been talked about in terms of what we have in statute with respect to that, and also just with how teachers are being trained to manage that technology, so that the folks at home know what's happening as well?
Yeah, I mean, great question, and we are presently working on that, and certainly the student privacy statute is definitely being considered as we do all of our training. We've had a lot of questions on, DCF type questions if teachers see something that is going on. And we, quite frankly, we've said, if you see something, you've got to say something. So you've got to report it, whether it's on Google Classroom or it's in person. But yes, Cristin, we are looking at that, and it's a great question. And it's one of the dilemmas that we deal with. But, there's so many dilemmas that there are no quick answers to. And I said in the beginning, none of this is perfect, but the benefits of having synchronous learning, I think, outweigh the issues that may come up, and we're going to just have to deal with that.
And I agree. I mean, I think I appreciate that answer, and I think it speaks to what we're all trying to do as policymakers and leaders, is to provide that balance between the needs, rights and needs and public health and economy and all those things. And I have the son who came in as a middle school student, and I can say having that synchronous learning would be a tremendous gift, which I'm sure a lot of the parents on this call right now are feeling. So thank you for that answer. It's a lot of thoughtfulness. And that's why, I'll just say again, another shout out to Mike Cummings, who I think is the best superintendent in the state. We have lots of great superintendents, but we are so lucky to have him, and the way he's been approaching this work, getting input, from what I'm hearing from Board of Ed members, from students, from parents, from his teachers. It's really tremendous.
And I will say to you that I agree with you 110%. Two of my grandsons are in Fairfield schools, and I can't say enough. And, I just want to say this. My grandson is in 5th grade, and he has a teacher that's pretty close to retirement. And what she was able to do with Google Classroom was amazing. So, I get really angry when people kind of broad brush and say, well, the older teachers don't know how to do it. Frankly, she could have been a model for this state.
That's awesome.
Laura, if you have anything, feel free to
actually, I do have a question, Brian. Thank you. Fran, if I could just jump in, because I was having a conversation with a teacher just the other day who was expressing some concerns about classroom readiness should they go back to, in-school learning. And so many times, and my mother was a teacher, so I remember going to her classroom with her and getting it all set up for the incoming class. Is there an expectation that these schools will have class space ready, that teachers aren't going to be expected to be moving things around and putting in partitions or any of these kinds of things? Is that part of the plans that the districts are submitting, that the spaces will be ready so that not only when our kids come back, but when the teachers come back, they're in a good place?
Well, I would expect so, Laura. I can't imagine that not being the case, especially since our schools have been empty, fairly empty since March. And I have heard from many people that from many superintendents that it has given the custodians more time to get the classrooms ready. I also know that in some cases, in order to provide the distance, the social distancing, that many of the things that we hold near and dear as teachers had to be moved out of the classrooms. Rugs, for example, where you have a meeting on the rug in the morning with your kids, you may not be able to do that. Some of the, rocking chairs and soft beanbag chairs, many of those are moved out. And that's going to be incredibly difficult for teachers, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the conversation that we had was also about, we've heard a lot about different instruction and teacher measures and all these kinds of things that sort of took some of the emotional piece out, right? Especially in elementary levels where that individualization and the relationship between teachers and the students is so much that all of the distancing and the things that you just mentioned of being removed will make that a little bit more challenging too. But I'm sure we'll get through it.
We will get through it, Laura, and teachers are amazing people, and I think they'll form those relationships with their kids, even if they're sitting straight forward in desks, which we haven't done in years, but I think you're going to see that right now. But, kids are resilient too, and they're going to understand, I think, that, we have to do it this way right now to stay healthy.
Fran, we'll get to see the when I was a kid.
Yes. We will see that. This is the way we sat, and that's the way you're going to see it in schools right now.
And Fran, I think it's important you added that in, that our kids are truly resilient as well. Sometimes we don't give them enough credit, and I appreciate you offering that sentiment that our kids can be truly resilient with the love and support from home and all around. So I think, the fist pump by Laura is saying we're going to get through this. We will, but truly it's going to require a lot of collaboration and work. But the theme that I take away from this as a positive is our kids and our families can be truly resilient in these difficult times.
Absolutely, Tony. And I'll tell you, here's something that I will tell you. Some districts did very small in-person summer schools this summer for the students, especially the students that were that have disabilities. And superintendents overall were shocked at how compliant they were with face coverings. They thought that was going to be a huge issue, and lo and behold, the kids kept them on, and it wasn't an issue at all, right, Cristin? And they're seeing it. South Korea, they see it as part of life. I think they're going to see it as part of life right now for the near future. Hopefully not forever, but for a long time.
So we're gonna wrap it up. I know a few people on this call have hard stops at 1. There was one question that was almost like a comment, so that I will still include, that someone had about when it related to cohorting in the high school years. They were just saying, please remember that for the middle school years. It's very similar to, I think it was a middle school parent raising that same concern. And with that, I'm going to just say thank you, everyone, for joining. Fran, if you have any parting words, we'd love to hear them, and we'll make sure we wrap up at 1. And I'd like to thank Laura, Tony, and Cristin for the amazing environment.
I just want to thank you. I'm so impressed that you wanted to hear more about our back to school plans. And I also want to say to you that I am available at any time, and I'll answer any question that you have to the best of my ability. Living in this ambiguous environment that we're in right now, where things change overnight. But thank you, and thank you for your interest and wanting to, as Laura said, really we'll get through this. We will if we are all together. I'm very proud of Connecticut and, where we are and how we are complying. So thank you.